Hello everyone, it's Silvia from Fairlight Tarot. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to have a look at some witchy stuff, and I'm very excited about this because if you watched a video that I posted about 6 to 8 months ago, I proposed to the community a custom spread that I use with all of the Seasons of the Witch oracles published by Rockpool. And I've actually updated that, as so many of you requested that I insert also the prompt for the newest oracles published by Rockpool in this series. So I have done just that. Let's have a look. And by the way, we have 7 now, so these ones are all available pretty much anywhere where Rockpool is shipping out via resellers. So you can find each and every one of these decks through Amazon, for example, or in your bookstores, perhaps. We are just missing Ostara, and the good news is that I had a look at the Rockpool website and I noticed that they updated the release date as to the 5th of January. Now, generally speaking, Rockpool, it's a bit all over the place. Sometimes they release first in Australia and then the rest of the world. It is an Australian company. Sometimes they actually match up the release in Australia and the US and then the rest of the world. Sometimes they released first in the US and then the rest of the world. I have no idea. In any case, for Australia, the release date is in January, so not long actually, but once that will be released, I will make sure to update this continuity spread. But let's have a look. So if you're not familiar with these decks, they're actually quite cool, and Rockpool started releasing them a couple of years ago. The very first one was a bit of a trial. They wanted to see how the tarot community responded to these to these decks, and they went all out because what they did, they actually picked up an oracle deck that was called, I think the name was Samhain or Oracle, even Season of the Witch Samhain or something like that, but it was an indie deck. And the creators were Lorian Anderson, Juliet Diaz, and it was based on the illustrations by Jada Rose. With time, when Rockpool took over, they actually moved on to a different illustrator. And I know that talking to other tarot collectors and lovers, some of us prefer Jada Rose, some of us prefer the newer illustrator, which I will talk about later. I personally think that they're all really beautiful. Of course, you're looking at 2 different art styles, but they integrate really well, and we'll see that thanks to the continuity spread. Now, I'm just gonna have a look quickly or show you quickly the decks. So this is your usual size of a Rockpool Oracle deck, so that's what we need to expect. And because we're talking about a release that was introduced in the market a few years ago, at that time Rockpool still used this kind of semi-gloss, I would say, finish to the cardstock. I don't mind, it's very beautiful anyway. The colors are actually brilliant. But you will notice that more recent publications by Rockpool, they actually use a matte cardstock. I really like that one as well. I honestly don't mind. I know that when we're talking about glossy or semi-gloss finishes, obviously it does catch the light, as you can see here, for example, but it doesn't really bother me that much. As a matter of fact, as I said, the colors, because of that finish, are actually more brilliant. This is an amazing deck for Samhain. What happened was that during this kind of project that went on for a few years, they not only replaced the illustrator, they also replaced the poems at the bottom of the cards with actual sentences. So the first couple of decks, you will still have poems at the bottom. So for example, here, let me just zoom in so I can give you a clear example of what I'm talking about. So this is, we have a fantastic image, we have the keyword reflection, we have the numbers, so it's easy to look up into the guidebook what this is referring to. And then, as you can see, we have a kind of a poem or something that is in poetic form. Let's say, be wary of things you believe to see with eyes wide shut. for they are mirrors of the mad and truths only spoken with a bleeding tongue. Well, this one is probably not the best example because it's actually rather easy to understand. But in some cases, I have to say, and I wasn't the only one, I found myself having to concentrate. English is not my first language, so I had to concentrate on the words. So much so that sometimes I kind of lost focus and I was kind of distracted. And this kind of lifted me away from the reading itself, which was a pity because this is a really fantastic deck. I absolutely love it. The images are very evocative. And what I can say for all of these iteration of the Season of the Witch Oracles, they're excellent readers, let's say. So obviously you need to decide whether you like it or not. It's something very personal because of the art style. As always, we may not like the art style, but I have to say, when used in a certain context, and obviously these are oracle decks, so you will know how to use them in your own practice. When using them in a certain context, these ones were they were straight shooters. They were really speaking out loud to me. And so that's the reason why I created the continuity spread, because I really wanted to share it with everyone. And by the way, I'm actually going to make sure to link it in the description box below. It's free for everyone. So if you want to download it, if you have a journal, you can print it out and then you can stick it to your journal. Or if you're using a digital journal, you can actually use the JPEG of this file, but it will be there for everyone. So they moved, as I was saying, they moved from, let's say, a more poetic or lyrical kind of sentence at the bottom of the card to something that, let's say, is more, it's different, it's more related to a sentence that to me is easier to make sense of. And let me just try and see. So one of the latest one is Litha. So let me just quickly grab Litha, which is this one here. And I'm just gonna show you the first card I have here, which is Stargazing. It's a really beautiful card. And as you can see, there is a difference in the art style, but I believe that it actually does integrate quite well. Not for all the cards, not all of the cards will be working, of course. But when we look at the continuity spread, and I will show you later because I will do a reading with that spread, it's not a punch in the face. Let's put it this way. Even though I have to say, I really like both of these styles. So in this case, we have Stargazing. It's the number 33. It takes a lot of courage to reach for the stars to expand the self, but it is possible. So as you can see, it is not in lyrical form, it's not in poetic form, and the meaning is, even though it is still a sentence, it works as a message, it works as some kind of an explanation, almost as if we were focusing into the keyword that is on the card as well. So I really, really appreciate this one, the way in which they changed it, because I find that it's more communicative for me. Obviously, I have heard of other people that did prefer the more lyrical format, which is absolutely fine. You do you. This is just for me, and for others, perhaps we are ESL, so English as second language, and for us it's actually easier when we can just read the message this way. It's just what we it's a way to work better with the deck. So this was Samhain, and by the way, all of these decks have different backs or different colored backs, and I have to say they've done a fantastic job. I really love the association with the colors and the different seasons, and obviously you can say the same when it comes to the gilding. There is one thing, so this is not my first Samhain. I think I bought the very first Samhain when it came out, and I do have to say, the more you use it, this type of gilding unfortunately does get damaged or chipped. So this is actually my second copy of this deck. I still use it quite a lot, and I'm quite pleased to see that it hasn't chipped yet. So perhaps they've changed the formula, perhaps the very first one that I bought was a defective one. I have no idea, but I did hear from people that it is depending on special colors, different colors. So perhaps the red one chips more easily. I don't know. Let me know of your experience in the comments below. I'm always interested. And then we're moving on to Litha. So I'm going to show you the decks in order of season, obviously. But in this case, today I'm pretending to live in the Northern Hemisphere simply because I absolutely love the vibes and associating September, October, November with Mabon and obviously Samhain in the Northern Hemisphere, and going towards the darker days of the year, whereas obviously in the Southern Hemisphere it's the opposite. I spent the majority of my life living in the Northern Hemisphere, and I just can't quite shake the idea of Samhain in October. So it is something that resonates more for me. One thing that I will do is probably in a couple of weeks, I will post my favorite decks for autumn and fall vibes, but I will also post for those of us living in the Southern Hemisphere, my favorite decks for spring vibes. So this is Yule, Seasons of the Witch Yule Oracle. And as you can see, it's very Christmassy with the red and the green. And also we see this kind of green on the gilding. This one, this is my first and only copy, and you can probably see that it's already a bit damaged on the corners. I really don't mind, to be honest. It's something that, as a matter of fact, it tells your story. It tells you that you're appreciating a deck because you're using it and you're not just leaving it on the shelf to gather dust. I feel that they've done an excellent job when it comes to the vibes of these decks and differentiating the vibes, and that was one of the reasons why I felt really comfortable in creating the continuity spread, because each and every one of these decks really embodies the vibes of that specific season. So this is Yule, so obviously there is a certain cheery vibe, let's say, and energy to the cards that I really like. Father Christmas, of course. But there's also some intense or pretty intense cards. Overall, I would say that they are quite balanced, but taking into account at the same time the differences of vibes of the season. So the Samhain deck is rather dark, but it's a darkness that it's not for darkness sake. It's a darkness that refers back to the fact that there's less light, and obviously when we're going towards Samhain, we also feel the thinning of the veil, and you can definitely feel that in the deck. Whereas obviously for Yule there's a kind of a cheery vibe. So this was Yule. And then moving on to Imbolc. Imbolc was probably the first one. No, sorry, because they did not, that's one thing that I did not understand, how they actually planned the releases, because they did not go in order. So obviously we have Beltane that came after Yule, and it was still illustrated by Jada Rose, but then the next one, I think it was Imbolc, and it was illustrated already by the new illustrator, Tihana Lukovic. And as always, I hope I'm not mispronouncing the names. If so, I apologize. This was really, it came out with a bang. Everyone loved this deck. Personally, I think it's probably my favorite, not just because I was born in February and obviously this is my season and I will always refer to it as my birth season. But I really, really love the vibes of this deck. I love the illustrations. I love the keywords. And this was probably also the first one in which they replaced the poems, let's say, at the bottom of the cards with sentences and messages. So a sacred space here, for example, says mundane to eyes, not on my own. These sacred responsibilities are mine to embrace. It is really an amazing deck. Cinnamon rolls, of course, dark days of winter. As you can see, it is well balanced. I think that they got better and better in releasing these decks, and they thought about the concept in a very dynamic but also very creative way. I must say that when it comes to the differences in the vibes, it must not have been easy, because even though of course you do have some recurring elements that are specific for each season, of course you will see the snow in Yule and Imbolc, for example, and when you speak about Beltane you will see the flowers and the bees, etc. But at the same time, it's not that easy to produce. I think it's 36 cards per deck, 36 cards with different drawings, different images, different keywords, different messages, etc. So I believe that actually there's a lot that goes into the production of these decks, and I really appreciate Rockpool and obviously the creators for doing all this. And may I say, this is my favorite color when it comes to the gilding. I have been using this deck a fair bit. It's already chipping here, unfortunately. I may grab a new one, but it's not as bad as the very first Samhain edition that I got with the red gilding. So that was Imbolc, and these are the backs, by the way, really beautiful. I love that they keep in tone with all of the editions. Then we're moving on to Beltane, and as I was saying, Beltane was probably the third edition that came out, so it is still illustrated by Jada Rose, and I believe it still does show poems at the bottom. I'm not entirely sure, let me just double check. In ceremony, you conjure a devotion so deeply it reflects thy worship into yourself. Yes and no. I think that with time, they try to make it so that it was easier to understand, or they gradually moved from something in a poetical lyrical form into something more like a message, although I have absolutely no idea. I am going to Mind Body Spirit in Sydney this October, and I will definitely make sure to go back to the Rockpool stand, and perhaps this time they will speak to me, because the last time they said no, they didn't want to answer any questions. They refer me to headquarters, which I found was really odd, but I'll try again. I'll try and ask them a few questions about their decks. So this is really beautiful. I really love the backs with the bees and this kind of warm gold for gilding. It's a really light tone kind of deck, as you would expect it to be for Beltane. But at the same time, I feel that we're still looking at a very balanced kind of deck. Wow, I love this card, Sacrifice. Look at that. You must find the ebb and flow of life within your very self. Embracing it all is embracing truth. I really think they've done a fantastic job with these decks. It's something that all of us in the tarot community have been able to appreciate. I think that because they've done such an amazing job also when it comes to advertisement. Obviously, they were advertising these decks. Not just Rockpool as a publishing company, but also the creators and the illustrator. And, there's a lot of us that have been enjoying using these decks for a few years already. And then they created the expectation, whenever there was a new release, obviously they created that kind of expectation and people wanting to do the pre-order. I know there's a few that have actually pre-ordered the... which one is the last one? The Ostara. I have not pre-ordered it because on Amazon you end up paying full price when you pre-order, and sometimes what happens is that they say it's going to come out on the 5th of January, for example, but then it doesn't, or at least not at Amazon. So you're able to find it in a bookstore, but Amazon doesn't have the stock yet. So I've decided, and this is just for Australia, I have no idea how it works overseas, but I decided not to pre-order on Amazon. Then we're moving on to Litha, of course, and I think Litha is one of the last ones. The last one that they released is Lammas, but this is Litha. So Litha, again, really beautiful, absolutely fantastic. It's got this purple that I really like, this purple color. We've got that in the backs, of course, and again on the gilding here. And this was again illustrated by Tihana Lukovic, so obviously you will notice that there's a continuity when it comes to the artwork. But I believe that because they release the decks, as I said, not in order, sometimes we would just overlook the fact that there's a difference in the illustrator. It doesn't bother me at all. It is absolutely not a deal breaker. And when I'm actually focusing on the card, I have to say I forget that I'm looking at two different illustrators. I really don't mind. Again, there you go. So obviously we're looking at a very balanced deck, perhaps even more so than other other seasons. So you have really energetic cards like a Rewild, Let Your Soul's Garden Grow Wild, Setting Yourself Free and Allowing Mysteries to Surprise You. But then you also have Rot and Decay. If fetters when left in the shadows, bring it to life by giving it away, which is an absolutely amazing kind of concept. And that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy working with this deck. Sometimes they also insert some yoga positions, so the sun salutation. Really, really, such an amazing concept, such amazing decks. So as I said, this one was Litha, and then I'm running out of space on my desk because there's just a few of them. We're looking at Lammas next. So Lammas was, if I'm correct, the latest release, and I think that it's just absolutely fantastic. I haven't had a lot of time to use Lammas yet, simply because, you know, it was just not released in season. Whether you lived in a northern or southern hemisphere, it just was not released for some Lammas. But I did have a look at it, and I had to, let's say, study the vibes and the guidebook in order to be able to include the Lammas in the continuity spread. So obviously I do know the deck, and it does feel, again, there is this sense of balance. You know, you have a very, like an invitation to enjoy life, a farm to table, liberate yourself from influence and invoke the power within. But then you also have failed harvest, embrace the lessons of life and sow the seeds of a brighter future. So I really like the idea that you can use each and every one of these decks as it by itself. And for example, if right now it's Mabon or just after Mabon in the northern hemisphere, you just use the Mabon deck. Or when Samhain will come, you just use the Samhain deck. Or you can also use them together, or you can use them for perhaps when you want to move from one season to the other. So there is a lot of movement, dynamic movement, I would say almost a transaction between the decks that you can use when you find a spread that you want to use when you pull the cards, for example. There is this sense of movement, and you can really follow up on deck by deck. And last but not least, we're looking at Mabon. Which is, no, it's probably, Mabon was probably after Imbolc. I think they published Mabon after Imbolc. So as you can see, it was in order, which is, I know, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. You know what? It takes a while to publish a deck, and it may also depend on the fact that, you know, that when they were working on the deck, it was indeed Mabon, but it took a while to just work on it and get it to the printers, and so that's why there was a delay sometimes. Mabon is probably my second favorite. Is really beautiful. There's a lot of earthy tones to this deck. As a matter of fact, when I use these decks by themselves, or perhaps I want to use them pairing them up with the tarot deck, I love using Mabon with the Gentle Tarot, because they do share a lot of earthy tones, and generally speaking, when you look at the art style, it doesn't clash, and there's a lot of similarities, so I actually really enjoyed them. Again, we're looking at a very balanced deck, because we have, you know, ceremonial, almost ceremonial kind of cards like Coco, you are loved, you are held, and you already have everything you seek. And then we're looking at shape-shifting and grieving. This is a very powerful card, for example. The chambers of your mourning are surrounded by nothingness, emptiness waiting to be seen. And look at the image. How powerful is that? But then again, you have something really cozy like pumpkin spice and apple cider. And you guys will know because this is, as I said, I'm going to post this video just a few days after Mabon in the Northern Hemisphere, and this is exactly the vibes you guys are going through, and I am so jealous because I would love to have that too. But of course in Australia now we're going towards winter spring, we're going towards summer, and obviously the temperatures are going up, so you don't necessarily drink a pumpkin spice latte, for example, even though I still do that. Okay, so I had to zoom all the way out because as you can see, this is the spread, and it's obviously taking into consideration and using all of the decks, all of the seasons. So it will be a bigger, an even bigger one when we have also Ostara, and I can't wait for that one to be published. But for now we have 7 out of 8, which is actually not bad, and we can already feel the vibes of the continuity. Now, the continuity spread is a spread that I created when I only had 4 of these Oracle decks, and then I just updated every time that Rockpool was publishing a new season. And I feel that because I appreciate these decks so much, it was actually really easy for me to insert a prompt for each and every season, as you know, as long as they kept to the same thing. And also, if you look at them this way, and I know that I'm sorry, I cannot fit all of them properly in the frame, and I'm just thinking when there's going to be another deck, it's going to be even more difficult. But I mean, this way you can have a bird's eye view of what they look like and the backs. And I think that they really integrate quite nicely. I like that they kept the moon, of course, in the backs. And also there is this sense of the 4 corners. There's these images that, you know, in a couple of cases here you still have hands, but then they moved on different symbols. So it's very nice to have the candles for Imbolc, and then for Beltane, obviously you're having the bees and so on and so forth. I would have probably put the pumpkin when it comes to Samhain, but that's absolutely fine. And it was the first one that they released. And I have to say though, the hand is very symbolic of reaching out through the veil, so it's really, really nice. So as I said, the continuity spread will be accessible to everyone for free, and you can see the link to it in the description box below. So what we're gonna do is, obviously we're starting with Samhain, and I'm just gonna shuffle the card. I did pre-shuffle them, so I don't need to shuffle them too much. It's just, this is just a sample reading. I literally just wanted to show you how to use the continuity spread and how to read it, and then we're going to shuffle the other decks as well. As you can see, very easy, because obviously we're looking at semi-gloss cardstock. It is quite easy to shuffle them. Because of my fingers, the injuries that I had, I don't often riffle and bridge shuffle. It's just a bit painful. But overhand shuffling is always very easy with these decks. They're the right size. As I said, it is your typical size, Oracle size from Rockpool. Let's see if I can probably push this one in a little bit. Not much. So this is one of the things that I like the most when it comes to witchy stuff. I really like to delve into all of the decks that I've got and see their properties, and also I like to follow their lead. So if a deck wants to take me down one specific path, generally speaking, I let it, because I believe that obviously that deck has been created with some kind of an intention from the creator, and I always like to feel like I'm almost in communion with the creator and seeing what their intention was and what the results are when using the deck as it is intended. However, when it comes to this spread, so there's obviously very generic spreads in the guidebooks of these decks, which is absolutely fine. I don't think that they originally thought about releasing all of them. I think at the beginning with Samhain, it was just something that was released because it was a Halloween, had Samhain of course, and they just wanted a deck that would have, been selling well, obviously. And then when they saw that it was such a successful release, they thought about producing or releasing Yule, and then they went on in the seasons, probably because they saw that there was a lot of demand in the market. And so creating a custom spread, I feel okay by doing that, because it's definitely something that doesn't go against the intention of the creators of these decks. Okay, so once you shuffle all of them, we need to look at the vibes that reconnect us to the meaning, the traditional meaning of that particular season. So when it comes to Samhain, the prompt is, what's the message from our ancestors? Because obviously we need to think about the fact that it's the time of the year in which the veil is really thin, and that way it's a lot easier to hear the message from our ancestors, but we also have the responsibility to listen to that message. And so I'm just gonna flip them all, and then we'll see. Then for Yule, we've got, what energy do we need to call back? Because Yule was the time of the year in which traditionally we needed to call back the sun, because we need the sun to have a harvest, basically. And so we obviously need the sun to come back in order to bring back life into nature. And so what energy, do we need to call back to us? And then when it comes to Imbolc, it's all about preservation. So what do we need to preserve? And it's the same concept when we see and when we hear that the snow is necessary to proceed in the cycle of nature. And there is that sense of, obviously the energies are low, and it is the time of the year in which we need to conserve them as much as possible in order to be able to then use them in the more energetic part of the year. And then when it comes to Beltane, what do we need to create? Because now our call is to understand that we had the time of the year in which we could rest, and now we are called to create something. So it's all about procreation. It's all about using our resources in line with nature in order to be able to bring something new into the light. And then when it comes to Litha, where do we need to grow? Because we are all focusing on these energies that we are using for this kind of creative process, but we also need to grow them, because every year we're supposed to grow in whatever it is that we're doing. If we just recreate the same thing year after year after year, the creativity becomes stiff, and it's not versatile anymore, it's not full of power anymore, and it's just reverts back to some kind of a stillness that we obviously don't want. So Litha is the time of the year in which we're focusing on growth. And when it comes to Lammas, it's the prompt is, how do we prepare for the harvest? So it's obviously looking at all of the resources that we planted. We know that nature is doing its course. There is this cycle that we need to respect and worship and also participate in. But at the same time, we can't waste time. We need to prepare ourselves to be ready for the harvest. So how do we prepare? And obviously Mabon is all about harvesting. So when you've done this, you can look at the cards. So again, we're going back to Samhain. What's the message from our ancestors? In this case is third harvest. Daughters of the woods, feel thy sacred swell with suppleness. Taste the gathering of honey's milk, filling your emptiness. It is a very powerful poem, but again, I choose to focus on a couple of keywords. So there's obviously this idea of filling, taste the gathering of honey's milk, filling your emptiness. There is this sense of replacing something that is now a space that is now void, a space that is now empty. So the message from the ancestor is to make sure that there's no obstacles in order to be able to receive the message and understand it as much as possible. Then we move on to Yule. What energy do we need to call back? Telling stories. What words so tender can be spoken so bravely unless they are true from the true truest of words. Telling stories is all about community. So what do we need to call back? What is the energy that we need to call back? The sense of being together, the sense of being a part of one big organism, of one big entity that is reflected in nature. Then when it comes to Imbolc, we've got what do we need to preserve, as we said earlier, coming of spring. Beneath my feet stirred the waking spiraling surges of warmth that tell of life ready to birth. Obviously, we need to preserve that kind of energy. I love the fact that the image is a person that goes to a cemetery. It looks like these are tombstones, for example. And there is that promise with the sun on the horizon. There is that promise of the light to come, which is so very unique in Imbolc. Then we're moving on to Beltane, and I have to flip the card because otherwise I won't be able to read it. So the prompt was, what do we need to create? And the card says inner power. So let it be known, no will or desire is more powerful than I embodied. And this is a fantastic card to pull, because obviously when we need to understand what we need to create, the inner power is one of the most empowering things, sorry about the repetition, but it's one of the most potent things that we can think of. So it is something that is very powerful, but it's also within ourselves. So we also need to touch within our core self in order to be able to align ourselves to nature and the perpetual cycle. Then obviously we're looking at Litha, where do we need to grow? And in this case, heirloom tomatoes. Absolutely. What do I need to grow? Heirloom tomatoes. Thank you for giving me a very straight answer. So enter into the depth of intimacy where the seeds of your desires will be nourished. This is a really sweet card. I really understand the message behind it. I like the way in which I can refer back to the image and think about this sense of planting the seed. So I need to grow that seed. There is something that has already been born, but I need to nurture it. So it's a very important message again. And when we're looking at llamas, how do we need to prepare for the harvest? And we got the bird feeder. Every tiny action taken in the pursuit of growth is a powerful step in the right direction. So this is probably coming at the right time. It's an encouragement to never give up. It's an encouragement to think and to look at what we've got in the time of the year in which we cannot really go back. Whatever we planted and we're going to harvest is what it is. So it is a message that says nothing is too small, everything is important, so we need to tend to it with love and affection and dedication. And then finally we got Mabon, what do we need to harvest? And we got tea magic that says reach into your subconscious, pull from the source and weave magic with intention, and the answers will unfold. Absolutely fantastic. So obviously we're harvesting the need to delve into our subconscious and our intuition and understanding with intention what the answers are, which is absolutely amazing, because as a continuity spread, and you will imagine it to be, it really creates that kind of bridge into the next season, which is again Samhain. So really lovely. I hope that you guys will enjoy this. This is, as I said, completely for free, a custom spread that I created that uses all of these decks. I'm really excited about the release of Ostara, which, as I said, will be next year, so we'll have to wait a few months, but it does have a date, which is good news. If you have any question, let me know in the comments below, but also if you have any suggestions about how to fine-tune even further these prompts, let me know in the comments below. But for now, I hope you loved it and have a great day.